Hey there, Felicia, coming to you for episode number 12, I think. Hopefully, I got that right. Um, I was on vacation last week, so though I took a little siesta, and actually, that is sort of what got me thinking about the topic I would like to talk about today. And for any new listeners, viewers, my name is Felicia Holmes. I am a certified health and life coach. I'm also a certified sober cis coach. And I have a program and a system that I use called Own It for Good, which is the title of this podcast or video channel that you're watching. And that stands for, and I'll just review it. I'll try to review it quickly every time for those that are new. But Own It stands for outcome. Why? Why do you want this outcome? So we got to know what we want, which is the outcome. We've got to know why we want it. N is for now what? Okay, now what do you? This involves like willingness, sort of deciding where you're going to start, what you're going to do about it, kind of making a plan, formulating, but knowing where you're going, meeting yourself, and realistic expectations, which actually is going to be today's topic, expectations. The I, getting back to the acronym, is integrity. T is for actually taking action. If you're like I used to be, I thought, planning and deciding was action. I wasn't right about that. You have to actually do something to make change in your life and to own it. And then for good, it needs to be, if you can own it and really be honest with yourself about what you want, what's getting in your way, making some changes, then wow, that is for your benefit, but it's also for my benefit if I know you, and even if I don't know you, because it ripples out into the world. It helps our families, our communities, our churches, our society in general. Can you imagine what the world would be if we all owned it? And there's a lot of it's out there, so life is a long game, and until you're dead and buried, you're always going to have an it to be working on. So it also turns life into sort of an adventure. At least that's my perspective. But today I wanted to talk about expectations and if they are disappointments waiting to happen. Have you heard that saying out there that unrealistic expectations, or maybe even expectations, are premeditated disappointments or disappointments waiting to happen? I know there's a few different versions of that sort of cliche out there. And my husband and I were actually having this conversation recently, because we were on vacation last week. And I use that word loosely because there were 9 of us, and 6 of which were between the ages of 15 and 19. Yeah. And then myself and my husband, and then my mother. So grandma came along as well. So we had my daughter Avery and a few of her friends, our nephew Sawyer, who's 16, and then my son Evan, who is 19. So it was a lot to manage. 2 cars, we took a road trip. So there were a lot of expectations. If you had expectations that could have, thrown a wrench in a lot of things, and actually did, specifically for my husband. He has gone to Florida. We actually, we go there quite frequently, and when it's he and I, it's very relaxing. We're reading our books, we're listening to music, we're taking leisurely bike rides. It's just he and I that, and we kind of enjoy a lot of the same things, and there's no schedule. Well, that's a little bit different with this many people and this many people of, the age ranges that we were taking. And he kind of got frustrated one day. And when we were kind of unpacking it the next day and talking about it, he goes, yeah. And he ended up owning it, and he apologized to everybody. He lost his cool a little bit. got a little frustrated, let it show. And he realized I had some unrealistic expectations. Yeah, I'm used to coming down here and used to this being a true vacation versus managing all of the, what do the teens want to do, waiting on teens to get ready, especially girls. He's been down there with a lot of boys before. And they're, teen girls are a whole different story. So you can imagine, unrealistic expectations definitely lead to frustration, resentment, disappointment. So I don't know. I thought we'd just talk a few minutes about that today and, even talk through some examples and how we can maybe manage expectations properly and even maybe avoid them. And I am actually personally taking a coaching course. I'm being personally coached because good coaches get coached. I can only take you as far as I'm willing to take myself, right? So, actually our homework yesterday was also around not having expectations. As a matter of fact, we were instructed to write a Post-it note and put it around to experiment for a whole week of trying to let go of expectations, to just have a sense of curiosity and openness and just letting life happen. So it just seemed like this was the right topic to talk about today. So I'm kind of just, talking off the top of my head here. I do have a few notes. But this is one area where the Enneagram has really been a transformational tool for me personally. And if you're not familiar with the Enneagram, it is a personality framework. I think it's more than just a test. I mean, you do take a test to kind of find your number, but within that, there's actually 27 personality types based on triads and subtypes and, all these different and wings and arrows. It's a very complex personality system, which but it takes some time to dig into, but which I have, and it has been really transformational for me. But the Enneagram basically helps me, let's use my glasses as an analogy, and I'm wearing, a certain type of glasses that help me see a certain way, but my husband might be wearing a different type of glasses that help him see the world differently. And the way I see the world through my lenses is part of why we get tripped up by expectations, because I'm expecting unrealistically, but I didn't know that. And this is what the Enneagram has helped me to see, is that I set myself up to be disappointed by having expectations that other people's brains work the way mine do. And that they see the world the way I see it. They don't. And this is where my husband and I were really bumping up to each other and having a lot of frustrations, especially around parenting, because his brain and the way he sees the world is like exactly the polar opposite, which we have learned over our many years of being married, 25 plus years, and we've actually been together for 30 years. So we've had a lot of practice, and we usually realize that even though we're on extreme ends of the spectrum, that usually that helps us. We're like yin and yang, and we land usually in the middle, a reasonable person. I heard somebody say the other day that marriage, I think it was Jordan Peterson, I don't know if you've heard of him, he's a clinical psychologist, but he said marriage hopefully is the two insane people creating one sane person together. And I don't think he's too far off the mark with that description. But the Enneagram has really helped me to not let go of expectations. And knowing the different personality types, and when I maybe catch myself in an expectation because I've been disappointed or have a resentment, then I can look and go, oh, maybe that person's brain works a little bit differently than mine. And it's helped me to see that most people's motivations are good, even if their surface behavior is not so great. I can now have a lot of compassion that there probably was a good motivation or intent behind it. So if you would like some help on that and want to learn a little bit more about the Enneagram, there will be more to come, but I can also, talk a little bit more about that privately and one-on-one with you. I do use it in my coaching. But basically, we're all walking around with different lenses, and we just see the world differently. So, and the Enneagram is one of those very helpful tools that help us to see and understand that. The other reason expectations can pop up, both realistic and unrealistic, is there's some underlying or implicit social contracts that we all have with each other, and maybe even an expectation, well, if I do this nice, good thing for you, you'll appreciate it, or you'll even return it. And sometimes we don't really stop and think that really we might be wanting somebody to act in our interest, and we're not really stopping to think, well, is this also a win for them? Is this also in their interest? And expecting somebody to do something that's in your interest but not in their interest is probably not a realistic option or a realistic way of thinking. Also, we have authority relationships. So back to parenting, parent-child. Parent-child, where we often as a parent, we maybe have a very realistic and reasonable expectation that, hey, kid, I would like to have your room cleaned by 4 o'clock this afternoon, and you go in at 5 and it's still a mess. That is definitely a disappointment, and maybe setting up for and maybe it was even a realistic expectation. But on the same hand, if you look at children and how children's brains are wired, and if they're, the maturity level, at the end of the day, is it realistic to expect a child to self-manage and get it done if they get lost in a game, or if they're, and then also, if we look at our own behavior, even if I set a deadline or a to-do list for myself and I didn't get it done, and I also got distracted or sidelined or whatever, things like that happen. And then to get maybe unrealistically or unreasonably frustrated by it when you look at the total picture of it and the maturity level of that person, and maybe even expecting more mature behavior from a child than you even expect from yourself. Is that realistic? I don't know. So anyway, this is a good thing to think about. One way that we could manage is to also say what we want. And a lot of times these things are just that implicit word, the implicit social contracts. These are things that are not being talked about. We're just assuming, if I do this, you'll do that. Or if you love me, or if you are related to me, families can get into this big time. Maybe I used to have an expectation before I've done a lot of this personal work that my mother should just take care of my kids when I'm gone because she's my mom. And that was just an expectation I have. Is that fair, or is that realistic? She might have a life of her own. And then if she said no to me, then I was disappointed and maybe thinking, oh, my mom's not doing something for me and does she really love me? Making it mean all kinds of crazy things. So we can get really tripped up by this. So unverbalized expectations, expecting others to do what maybe is in our interest, but not in theirs. Like in that case with my mom, it might not have been in her interest, even though she's their grandmother and she loves her grandchildren. She might have had other plans. So to always expect her to put her interests aside to meet mine was pretty unrealistic and unfair, honestly. And maturity level, if you're in an authoritarian relationship. So one way that we can avoid this is to communicate. Speak up, make it clear what we want. And there are people out there that, because they are wired, and these are generally our 2s and 9s, on the Enneagram that really kind of intuitively know what people want and tend to be very helpful and are willing to put their own interests aside, sometimes to meet the needs of others, will expect that same. This is where the Enneagram can be very helpful. They think that everybody else is seeing the world the same way. And so they're not willing to verbally communicate what they want because they really have an expectation that, well, that other people's brains and personalities and hearts are wired the way they are, and that they will automatically meet my need because duh. But that's not a duh for most people. And so that the Enneagram has been truly enlightening and helpful. And I'm not going to, maybe my next episode will be an overview of the Enneagram. That would be maybe be very helpful, but it has been a huge transformational tool for me to get back to reality and having realistic expectations. The other thing is to find something to be grateful about and to let go, like my homework is to try not having expectations. Try it out. Maybe write yourself a sticky note and do some homework this week of trying not to have expectations and being open to see what life will have in store for you and to find something to be grateful for. So I'm going to keep it short and sweet today because I need to go pick up my daughter from a sports practice. All right, peace out. Talk to you next week.